Hi, it's Veronica Nye, Senior Economist at TFI. Thanks very much for joining me today. We've talked a lot in the last several weeks about tariffs on imported products, but today I want to talk about what the potential impact could be on fertilizer demand as we look at potential restrictions on exports of U.S. agricultural products. So, of course, when we think about fertilizer consumption in the United States, four crops really dominate about 75% of total fertilizer usage: corn, soybeans, cotton, and wheat. So when we look at those four commodities, all four of them are highly dependent on export markets. For example, corn, about 20% of all corn grown last year was exported when you count corn and its raw product as well as DDGs and ethanol. Soybeans and wheat, about 40% of each of those commodities produced last year were exported, and 97% of all cotton grown last year in the United States was exported. So certainly when we start thinking about potential impacts of reduced demand from export markets for those four crops, there should be some real concerns for the fertilizer industry. Not necessarily right now, but as we think about going into the fall, and then in particular in 2026, when growers are making purchasing decisions for the next growing year. So, for example, as we sort of think about the export portion of those crops and its impact on fertilizer markets, about 20% of all nitrogen used in the United States is used on those four crops that are destined for export markets. About 27% of all phosphate and about 27% of potassium fertilizer used last year in the United States supported the growth of crops that were later exported. In total, about 22% of all fertilizer used in the United States last year went to support the growth of crops that were ultimately exported. So certainly a significant impact and something that we're keeping an eye on, and that we certainly know growers are keeping an eye on. If we want to be a bit more specific, of course, as we think about these tariffs, a 10% tariff pretty much across the board is in effect today, with the exception of China, where we've had much more accelerated tariffs, and then the Chinese have retaliated against the United States. This is important for those crops, of course. Last year, 8% of U.S. wheat exports were destined for China, 2% of corn exports, 31% of cotton exports, and 52% of soybean exports were to China. When we look at that impact on fertilizer, in total, about 4.5% of fertilizer used in the United States last year is attributable to exports of those commodities to China. So certainly a lot on the line for growers and for folks who are exporting those agricultural products, but also a lot on the line from the fertilizer perspective if we think about the potential challenges for demand of those products, and if we see a significant, maybe longer term challenge in demand, what does that mean to fertilizer demand, particularly in 2026? So a lot to think about, of course, a lot of different elements at play here, but just wanted to think about not just the current state of tariffs and the potential impact on this year's supply of fertilizer, but also as we think about the longer term impacts that we could potentially see as a result of some demand destruction. Thanks very much for joining me today. Come back next week. We'll try to talk about something a little more cheery. Thanks very much.